the orbital station Elysium. 9 floated silently against the blackness of space, a glittering hive of lights and activity. Traders, diplomats, scientists, and maintenance crews moved along its corridors like ants in a vast, organized colony. In the midst of all this, Jared Klein moved at a slower pace, his apron dusted with flour, his hands smelling faintly of garlic and spices. To most people, he was just the cook, a man who made meals, cleaned kitchens, and ensured no one went hungry. Nothing more, nothing heroic, nothing important. Jared had worked on Elysium 9 for nearly 5 years. He knew the station better than anyone, perhaps better than some of the senior officers. He knew the quiet maintenance tunnels that ran behind the walls, the storage bays tucked in corners no remembered, and the hidden ventilation shafts that could carry a person unnoticed from one sector to another. He had memorized every corner, every shortcut, and every emergency exit. All of it he had learned in small, quiet ways, observing, remembering, noting, and adapting. Every day he served meals to the same faces. Captain Ralon, a gruff man with a permanent scowl, always demanded extra protein. Dr. Lyra Van, the head scientist, rarely spoke more than a few words, but smiled faintly when Jared added a sprig of herb to her tray. And then there were the station's residents, engineers, janitors, traders, and a handful of alien diplomats whose languages he didn't fully understand, but whose expressions of pleasure after a well-cooked meal needed no translation. Jared's life was ordinary. He woke before dawn, prepared breakfast, cleaned up, prepared lunch, cleaned up again, and repeated the cycle. At night he slept in his small quarters, listening to the hum of the station's engines and the occasional distant chatter echoing through the corridors. Yet Jared never felt small. Not truly. He felt useful, and usefulness, he believed, was just as important as glory. For a long time, that belief had been enough. Until the warning came. It was a subtle message at first, barely noticed by most of the station's staff. The automated systems reported unusual energy fluctuations in the outer sectors. Communications with the nearby patrol fleets were delayed, sometimes interrupted by strange static. Engineers mentioned minor malfunctions in equipment that should have been reliable. To everyone else, it seemed like minor problems, maintenance issues, human error. Jared, however, noticed patterns. The kitchen's refrigeration unit would lose power for minutes at odd intervals. The oxygen regulators in one section of the station would briefly drop before returning to normal. Small anomalies insignificant to most, but Jared had a careful eye. He began quietly preparing. Not in panic. Not in fear, but in careful planning. He cataloged supplies, extra rations, medical kits, makeshift tools, and spare parts he could repurpose. He traced paths through maintenance corridors and ventilation shafts, noting areas where he could hide or escape. He didn't tell anyone. Who would listen to a cook? The tension in the station grew slowly, almost imperceptibly. Captain Ralon argued with the engineers about the minor malfunctions, but the scientists debated the meaning of the energy fluctuations. Traders whispered rumors about potential threats, but no one took decisive action. Jared watched it all with quiet patience. He had learned long ago that humans often ignored the obvious until it was too late. Then came the news. A fleet of marauders, a group known for obliterating outposts without mercy, was heading toward Elysium 9. Sensors detected their approach far earlier than anyone expected. Panic began to ripple through the station. Captain Ralon convened an emergency meeting in the main command hall. The room was tense, filled with people in uniforms, badges, and some with no titles at all. Civilian scientists, engineers, and diplomats who had nowhere else to go. They spoke quickly, voices raised, gesturing toward holographic displays, showing the marauders' progress across the sector.
"This is serious," said Commander Heelan, one of the senior officers, "but we are not defenseless."
The station's shields will hold. Our fleet is on the way. We need to stay calm. But they're coming faster than predicted, an engineer said, her fingers trembling as she manipulated the display. The outer sectors report sensor blackouts. Some systems are already offline.
We could be blind before the fleet arrives.
Captain Roland's jaw tightened. Keep monitoring. Maintain communication. Don't spread panic. Most of the people in the room nodded nervously. Jared, standing quietly near the back, didn't nod. He didn't speak. Instead, he observed. The panic, the confusion, the fear. It was all predictable. And it was exactly why he had been preparing. As the meeting ended, people scattered. Soldiers hurried to their stations. Engineers ran to fix minor malfunctions. Civilians tried to follow instructions, many unsure what those instructions truly meant. Jared returned to the kitchen, not to cook, but to gather supplies. He filled his pack with rations, medical kits, tools, and a few metal pipes he could use for defense. The station's corridors became a river of chaos in the hours that followed. Alarms blared. Red lights flashed, casting long shadows along the walls. Marauder ships appeared on the sensors, sleek and deadly, their dark hulls reflecting distant starlight. Small attack drones tore through the outer defenses, striking at vital power conduits and communication arrays. Panic spread faster than the attacks. Civilians ran blindly, soldiers shouted orders that were never followed, and the alien diplomats, dignified in peace, screamed and fled like frightened children. Jared moved through it all, calmly. He didn't run. He didn't panic. He guided. He lifted debris to clear paths. He found wounded engineers and helped them crawl to safety. He handed tools and improvised weapons to civilians too afraid to act. Some noticed him. One young engineer, barely 17, stared as Jared hoisted a fallen pipe to block a corridor.
You're just the cook,
she whispered. Jared looked at her, wiping sweat from his brow. Then maybe it's time the cook did more than cook. In the chaos, small victories mattered. A power conduit redirected just in time prevented a sector from going completely dark. A short circuit in the emergency doors trapped marauder drones in a hallway long enough for people to escape. All of it orchestrated quietly by a man no one considered a hero. Hours passed. Explosions rocked the station. Fires ignited in storage bays, smoke filled the corridors, burning eyes and making breathing difficult. Yet, amidst the destruction, Jared never faltered. He moved from group to group, always observing, always calculating, always improvising. By the time night fell on the station, a meaningless concept in orbit, but humans kept their routines. Jared had led dozens of people to safety. He had blocked corridors, rerouted power, and salvaged supplies. The station's leadership remained trapped in the command hall, debating endlessly, failing to act decisively. And yet, the ordinary cook had become the quiet guide, the unseen protector, the one who might just keep them alive. And still, the marauders had only begun. Jared paused for a moment in the smoke-filled corridor, leaning against a scorched wall, his hands trembling slightly from exhaustion. He looked at the people he had guided, terrified, shaken, but alive. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He knew the real battle was ahead. He pulled a small communicator from his pack and whispered to himself, "Time to see what the cook can really do." The lights flickered. A distant explosion shook the station. The marauders were moving deeper into the structure. The ordinary life he had known, the life of kitchens, aprons, and quiet routines, was gone. In its place, chaos and danger stretched through every corridor, and Jared understood, in that instant, that the survival of Elysium 9 might depend on him. No one had asked for a cook to lead them through war. No one had expected a man who boiled water and chopped vegetables to become a hero. But Jared knew one thing with certainty. When the station fell, he would not just survive. He would fight. Because sometimes the unlikeliest person is exactly the person a world needs. The alarms blared through Elysium, 9 like a warning from the stars themselves. Red lights cast jagged shadows along the corridors, illuminating twisted metal and the occasional flicker of sparks where the Marauders' drones had struck. Smoke curled upward, filling the air with a choking haze. The station shook as the distant hum of explosions reverberated through its hull. Panic had become a living thing, moving with every person, every shout, every terrified footstep. Jared Klein moved calmly through it all. The scent of burnt wires and scorched metal stung his nose, but he ignored it. He had already memorized every path that could lead people to safety. He had prepared supplies in advance, hidden them in corners and maintenance shafts where no one thought to look. Now, those preparations mattered more than ever. "Over here!" "Quickly!" Jared shouted, waving a trembling engineer toward a nearby maintenance tunnel. The young woman hesitated, eyes wide with fear, but she followed him. He could see her panic, but also the flicker of hope that came from having someone guide her. Through the smoke and confusion, Jared's mind worked faster than anyone else's. He spotted blocked corridors and collapsing floors, recalculated routes in seconds, and silently directed small groups of terrified civilians toward safety. He used crates and loose panels to block incoming drones, forcing them into predictable paths where they could be avoided. Every step, every action was measured, precise, and purposeful. A group of maintenance workers huddled near the edge of a hallway, too scared to move. One of them was bleeding from a gash on his arm, and another kept shaking violently. We can't," one muttered. "You can," Jared said firmly, gripping a metal pipe he had picked up along the way. "Follow me. Trust me." His calm confidence acted like a tether in the storm of fear. Slowly, the group rose, and they moved, following his lead, through hidden corridors he had long ago mapped in his mind. In the control center, Captain Roland and the senior officers argued. "We need to focus on defense systems," one shouted. "No! We should evacuate non-essential personnel," another countered. The commander's voice was lost in the chaos, drowned out by alarms and the hum of emergency generators. The crew's inability to act decisively left gaps the Marauders exploited immediately. Jared didn't waste time worrying about leadership failures. He knew what needed to be done, and he acted. He slipped through a corridor where a small firefight had begun. Marauder drones hovered near the ceiling, scanning for movement. Jared remembered an old kitchen vent running above them. He climbed quickly, pulling himself through the tight space, and dropped silently behind the drones, knocking them over with a heavy pipe. The drones sparked and fell to the floor, unable to detect him or the civilians following him. For the first time, some of the survivors began to notice Jared in a different light. He wasn't just a cook. He was a guide, a protector, someone who could think clearly when everything else had fallen apart. Whispers spread among those he led. He knows where to go. "He's saving us." The station shuddered again. Explosions tore through sections of the hull, sending alarms screaming louder. Smoke filled the air thicker now, and visibility dropped to near zero. Jared led his group through the ventilation system, a route only he could remember. The narrow path forced them to move in single file, each step careful, measured, but fast enough to avoid Marauder patrols. As they crawled through the vents, Jared realized that the Marauders weren't mindless attackers. They were organized. Drones moved in patterns, scanning the corridors, communicating through flashes of light. Their movements suggested a central command coordinating them. If the core was destroyed or disrupted, the drones might falter. If the station could reach it, there might be a chance. Jared didn't speak aloud, but he calculated quickly. The central node was located near the engineering bay, heavily guarded by drones and automated defenses. To reach it, they would need to cross open corridors, dodge patrols, and use improvised tools to distract or disable the enemy. It sounded impossible. Most would have turned back. But not Jared. They emerged from the vents near a storage area. The group paused, catching their breath. A young engineer whispered, Are you really going to lead us through them? Jared looked at her calmly. We have no choice. If we stay here, we die. We move. We survive. I'll get us there. His voice carried a certainty that went beyond words. It carried trust, and in chaos, trust was rare. The group moved cautiously, hiding behind crates and machinery. A drone hovered nearby, scanning. Jared tossed a small container of cooking oil he had salvaged from the kitchen across the corridor. It spilled, reflecting the drone's light and triggering its sensors falsely. The drone hesitated, giving them the moment they needed to dash past. One corridor led to an emergency stairwell, its doors damaged and partially jammed. Jared pried the panels open with his pipe, allowing the group to climb. The heat from fires below warmed the metal, but he ignored it. Every step mattered. Every second counted. By the time they reached the lower maintenance tunnels, the group had grown in number. They had picked up a few stragglers, civilians too scared to move until someone guided them. Jared assigned tasks to anyone willing to help. Some carried tools. Others blocked entrances behind them. Small acts of coordination made a difference, giving the illusion of order in the chaos. As they moved through the tunnels, they came across a wounded soldier, trapped under a piece of fallen metal. His armor was scorched, and he struggled to breathe. I can't move, he gasped. Jared knelt beside him. Yes, you can. I'll get you out. Using a combination of levers and pipes, he freed the man, carefully helping him to his feet. The soldier looked at him with a mix of disbelief and gratitude. I thought we were done for, he said. You're not done, Jared replied. Not if we keep moving. Through the tunnels, they encountered more dangers. Fires raged in old storage bays. Drones patrolled every open space, and the station's structure groaned under the stress of battle. Yet, Jared adapted to every challenge. He used fire suppression chemicals from the labs to create smoke screens, improvising weapons from metal rods and cables. Each small victory built confidence, not just in the survivors, but in themselves. Finally, they reached a corridor that led toward the engineering bay, the heart of the station's power systems. This was where the Marauders' attacks were coordinated, and Jared knew it. He glanced at the group. Tired, smoky, dirty, but alive. This is it, he said. We have to move smart, move together, and trust each other. Follow me. The corridor was a gauntlet. Sparks fell from broken overhead conduits, and the walls were scorched from previous drone attacks. A Marauder drone appeared ahead, scanning methodically. Jared froze for a moment, calculating. Then he grabbed a panel and pulled it free, tossing it into the drone's path. The drone's sensors misread the movement, giving them enough time to dash past. Another group of drones appeared farther down. Jared quickly thought of a plan. He opened a small valve in the wall, letting out a burst of steam from the station's emergency pipes. The hot steam rose, confusing the sensors. The drones hesitated, then retreated. The survivors followed Jared through the gauntlet, each step bringing them closer to safety, and yet closer to danger. The engineering bay was heavily guarded, but Jared's mind raced. He had observed patterns of the drone's movements, studied weak points, and understood the station's layout better than anyone else. If they could disrupt the command systems here, the Marauders' advantage might be nullified. As they neared the entrance, a warning light flashed. A large section of the corridor had collapsed. A civilian screamed, panic rising again. Jared didn't hesitate. He found a metal support beam nearby and used it to brace a panel, creating a makeshift bridge over the debris. One by one, the group crossed safely. Jared paused at the edge, looking back at the group. Their faces were pale, their breaths ragged, but they trusted him. That trust was not granted lightly in the chaos of battle. It was earned. And Jared understood that if they failed now, it would not just be the end of the station. It would be the end of hope. The sound of the Marauder fleet's ships reverberated through the hull. Explosions shook the corridors, and lights flickered as sections of the station went offline. The path ahead was treacherous, yet Jared stepped forward without fear. He had made a choice. If they were to survive, he would lead. Not because he was a soldier or trained for battle, but because he understood the station, understood people, and understood one unshakable truth. Humans could adapt, improvise, and survive where others failed. He turned to the group. "We keep moving," he said. "Every second counts. Don't stop. Don't look back. Trust me." The survivors nodded, gripping tools, pipes, and whatever they could hold. Jared led them forward into the unknown. The battle for Elysium. 9 had only begun, but in that moment, a cook had become something more. Something vital, something that might save them all. Jared led the group through the maintenance tunnels, their footsteps echoing softly against metal walls. The smoke from fires above had cleared slightly, but the station still smelled of burning circuits and scorched metal. The survivors followed him without hesitation now. Fear was still there, but it had been replaced by something stronger: trust. They believed he could get them through this alive. They emerged into a wide service corridor, partially collapsed but navigable. Sparks fell from damaged overhead conduits, and small fires burned along the walls. Jared's eyes scanned the space carefully. The drones were fewer here, but they weren't gone. He could hear the mechanical hum of their sensors and see the faint glow of their patrol lights reflecting on the metal floors. "This is where it gets tricky," he said quietly. "The command node is just ahead, past this corridor and through the engineering bay. Heavily guarded, but not impossible." A young communications officer, clutching a metal rod for protection, looked at him nervously. "Impossible? Are you serious? How are we supposed to get through them?" Jared smiled faintly, though it did not reach his eyes. "We improvise. That's what humans do best." He led them carefully through the corridor, using shadows and debris to hide their movements. Every step was calculated. Every pause had a purpose. He had memorized the drone's patrol patterns, observed their sensors' timing, and planned their route to the command node down to the smallest detail. They reached a junction where the corridor split. One path led to the main engineering bay, heavily guarded. The other was a narrow ventilation shaft that ran above the bay. Jared pointed to the shaft. "We go up. It's tight, but it avoids most of the drones. Follow me, one at a time." The group hesitated. Some of them were not used to crawling through cramped spaces, and the thought of being trapped above the bay filled them with dread. Jared understood their fear, but he didn't let it shake him. "We move fast, stay quiet, and help each other. You'll be fine." They climbed into the shaft carefully, one by one. Jared went first, followed by the communications officer, then the engineer, then the civilians. The narrow space forced them to crawl in single file, but it gave them cover from the drones below. As they moved, Jared thought about the command node. The Marauders' attacks were coordinated from there. If they could disrupt it, the drones would lose their synchronization, giving the humans a chance to fight back or escape. It was risky, extremely risky, but Jared had no other choice. They reached an access panel that led into the engineering bay. Jared paused to listen. Below, he could hear the hum of the Marauder drones and the occasional mechanical beep from the control systems. He could see movement through small cracks in the metal floor. The drones were patrolling, unaware of the humans above. Jared turned to the group. "We have one shot at this. The engineer and I will go in and sabotage the command node. The rest of you stay here, ready to act if needed." The engineer, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek, nodded. "Understood. Just make sure we all get out alive." Jared climbed down first, keeping low to avoid detection. The engineer followed, carrying a toolkit he had scavenged earlier. They moved slowly, using debris and shadows for cover. The drone's sensors swept the area methodically, but Jared's timing was perfect. He knew when to move, when to freeze, and when to create distractions. He reached a small control panel leading to the command node. The alien design was unlike anything he had ever seen. Intricate circuits, glowing lights, and wires that pulsed like veins. Jared examined it carefully, noting points where a minor disruption could cascade through the system. A few well-placed short circuits might confuse the drones and disable the node temporarily, he whispered to the engineer. Hand me the insulated wire and the plasma cutter. We're going to make a little chaos. The engineer handed them over, hands shaking but steady. Jared set to work, carefully cutting and reconnecting circuits, rerouting power in a controlled way. Sparks flew, and the panel hummed louder for a moment, then went silent. The drones below twitched, then paused. Their movements became erratic, their patterns broken. Good, Jared whispered. Keep an eye on the drones. They might try to reset. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the floor. A marauder captain had entered the bay, a towering figure with sleek black armor and glowing eyes. It moved with precision, scanning for intruders. Jared froze for a moment, then ducked behind a console, heart racing but mind clear. The captain's sensors swept the area. Its movements were deliberate, almost mechanical, but Jared noticed a pattern. It moved quickly in straight lines, pausing at intervals. He could use that. He signaled to the engineer. When I say now, create a diversion. We can trap it in the corner while we finish. The engineer nodded, understanding immediately. Jared took a deep breath and tossed a small piece of debris across the bay. The captain's sensors flicked toward it, and it moved to investigate. Jared and the engineer worked quickly, rerouting more circuits, setting up a trap using wires and exposed conduits. The captain returned, more cautious this time. Jared ducked behind a console again, waiting for the perfect moment. The engineer whispered, We don't have much time. I know, Jared replied. Just a few more seconds. He reached out, connecting the final wire. Sparks erupted, and a controlled overload pulsed through the system. Lights flickered, and the hum of the command node faltered. The drones below jerked violently, their movements erratic and confused. The captain froze, momentarily disoriented by the sudden surge of energy. Jared seized the moment. He lunged from behind the console, swinging the metal pipe he had carried all along. The captain staggered back, surprised by the attack. Jared moved with precision, striking at weak points in the armor, not to kill, but to disrupt and confuse. The engineer joined in, using tools to jam the captain's legs and sensors. Together they forced the alien back, step by step, toward a corner where the overload from the command node crackled dangerously. Sparks flew, wires arced, and the captain roared in frustration. Below, the drones continued to falter, some crashing into walls, others shutting down entirely. The command node systems were compromised, and the humans had gained a critical advantage. Jared looked at the engineer, nodding. Time to get out. They moved quickly, retreating through the maintenance shaft, the sounds of chaos echoing behind them. As they emerged into the corridor where the rest of the group waited, they were met with wide eyes and gasps of relief. The civilians and soldiers had watched from their hidden positions as the command node's disruption caused drones to malfunction and retreat.
You did it, the young communications officer said, voice trembling.
You actually did it? Jared shook his head. We did it. Together. The group didn't celebrate. There was no time for that. The station was still under attack, and many drones remained. But they had gained a critical advantage. For the first time, the survivors felt hope. They had seen that humans could adapt, improvise, and fight in ways the marauders had not anticipated. Jared led them to a safer section of the station, using the same tunnels and corridors he had mapped long ago. Along the way, he instructed them on small tasks, blocking doors, creating diversions, moving quietly, and watching each other's backs. Each person contributed, and each act built confidence. By the time they reached a semi-secure area near the medical bay, the group had grown calmer. They huddled together, catching their breath, tending to minor injuries, and preparing for the next phase. Jared looked around at the faces, tired, but alive, and felt a quiet sense of pride. They had survived the first major challenge. They had disrupted the Marauders' command systems. They had proven that even ordinary humans, armed with knowledge, courage, and creativity, could stand against overwhelming odds. Jared knew the fight was far from over. The Marauders would regroup. The station was still damaged, and many dangers remained. But for the first time, he saw something in the eyes of the survivors. Trust, hope, and determination. And he understood, in that moment, that being a cook had not limited him. It had prepared him in ways no one could understand. Observation, patience, improvisation, skills honed in kitchens and quiet corridors were exactly what he needed to survive and to lead others through this chaos. The station might fall if they made mistakes, but Jared was no longer just a cook. He was a strategist, a guide, a protector. And if they all survived, it would be because one ordinary man had refused to remain ordinary. He looked at the group and said, "Rest for now. Soon, we go back. We take the fight to them, and we make sure Elysium 9 survives." No one argued. No one questioned. They had seen what he could do. They had felt the difference between fear and leadership, and they trusted him completely. As the smoke continued to drift through the station and the distant hum of Marauder ships filled the hull, Jared allowed himself a brief moment to reflect. The journey ahead would be dangerous. The command node had been disrupted, but not destroyed. The alien forces would respond. The station was fragile, and every step could mean life or death. Yet, in that moment, Jared felt a strange calm. The chaos, the fear, the destruction. It did not paralyze him. It focused him. And he knew, deep down, that the unlikeliest hero could sometimes be the one who mattered most. And Jared Klein, cook of Elysium 9, was about to prove it. The engineering bay of Elysium 9 lay in ruins. Sparks jumped from severed conduits, smoke drifted in gray clouds, and the hum of failing machinery filled the space. Drones staggered in malfunction, crashing into walls or spinning helplessly as their sensors failed. Jared Klein moved through the chaos with a calm that seemed impossible amidst destruction. Every step was deliberate. Every glance calculated. The station had begun to trust him, not because he was a soldier, not because he had armor or training, but because he could see patterns others missed and act decisively when the world fell apart. He crouched behind a scorched console, peering at the figure emerging from the shadows. The Marauder captain had returned, taller and more imposing than any drone. Its armor gleamed under the flickering lights, and its glowing eyes scanned the bay with precision, searching for intruders. Jared didn't flinch. He had anticipated this confrontation, had thought through every move. This would not be luck. It would be ingenuity. The captain moved forward, its steps deliberate and mechanical. Jared noticed the slight delay in its sensor scanning, a flaw he could exploit. He reached into his pack and pulled out a metal rod, battered but sturdy. He had also salvaged pieces of conduit, wires, and a few volatile chemicals from the nearby labs, improvised weapons, but effective if used correctly. He whispered to the engineer at his side, "Cover me. When I move, follow." "Distracted if it notices us?" The engineer nodded, clutching a short metal pipe as a shield. They moved carefully, crouched low behind debris. The captain's sensors swept past them, missing by inches. Jared could feel the tension building, the stakes higher than anything he had faced before. One mistake, one wrong move, and the station might fall. Jared stepped out from behind the console, tossing a small container of volatile chemical toward a corner. The container shattered, sending a plume of smoke upward. The captain's sensors flickered, momentarily confused. Jared seized the moment, moving quickly behind a support beam and striking at its legs with the metal rod. Sparks flew as metal met armor, and the captain stumbled slightly, but recovered instantly. The engineer joined in, jamming one of the captain's legs with a makeshift tool, slowing it down. Jared ducked, rolled, and swung at the captain's torso, targeting weak points in the alien design. The captain's eyes glowed brighter, and it lashed out with precise strikes. Jared dodged, feeling the rush of near death as claws narrowly missed his arm. Every second felt like an hour. The bay shook from distant explosions and the occasional collapse of a support column. Jared's mind raced. He couldn't defeat this creature in a straight fight. Not strength, not skill, only ingenuity. He darted toward a control panel with exposed wires, lifting a conduit to create a barrier of sparks and smoke. The captain paused, wary of the sudden hazard. Jared used the pause to maneuver behind another console, tossing a metal pipe like a javelin. It struck a support beam near the captain, sending debris onto the floor and forcing it back. Below, the drones were still malfunctioning, some retreating, others spinning in confusion. The captain's control over them was fractured, giving Jared a small advantage. But it wouldn't last. He needed to finish this quickly. He glanced at the engineer. "We need to lead it toward the power conduit on the far wall. There's a chance we can overload it." The engineer understood immediately. "If it triggers the overload, it might take the captain down too." Jared nodded. They moved as one, careful to avoid the captain's strikes. Sparks flew and smoke choked the air. Jared leapt over a fallen panel, rolling into a crouch, then signaled the engineer. The captain followed, drawn by their movements. At the far wall, Jared smashed a small panel, exposing high-voltage circuits. He pulled a few wires free, connecting them with another makeshift wire to create a controlled overload. The engineer readied another metal rod to nudge the captain closer. Jared shouted, "Now!" The engineer tapped the captain's leg with the rod, forcing it toward the exposed power conduit. Sparks flew violently as the circuits overloaded. Electricity arced through the metal, and the captain roared, caught in the surge. Its armor shimmered and sizzled, and then it collapsed, incapacitated by the precise improvisation of a man who had never wielded a weapon before. Jared exhaled, feeling the tension drain, but he knew the fight was not entirely over. The drones were still active, though scattered and malfunctioning. The station itself was damaged, fires still burning in places, and sections of the hull compromised, but they had gained the upper hand. He turned to the group, now emerging from their hiding spots. "Move carefully. We need to secure the engineering bay and stabilize the systems we can." The survivors followed him, moving past the incapacitated captain and the scattered drones. Jared led them to control panels and circuits that could be restored. Using improvised tools, they rerouted power to critical systems, stabilized oxygen flow, and reignited backup lighting. Small victories, but important. The young communications officer looked at Jared with awe. You actually did it? You saved the station." Jared shook his head. "No, we saved it. Together." Everyone who moved, helped, and trusted each other played a part. I just guided. They worked together, human adaptability and courage, proving stronger than alien technology. Fires were suppressed with chemicals from the labs, doors were reinforced with debris and panels, and the drone's coordination was permanently disrupted. Elysium 9 had survived the first wave of attack, thanks to improvisation, bravery, and quick thinking. Jared moved to the command node's control panel, surveying the damage. The Marauder's system was offline, partially destroyed by the overload, and the drones were scattered across the bay, unable to regroup. The humans now had a chance to plan the next move, but they could not waste time. He turned to the engineer and said, "We need to map the rest of the station quickly, check for remaining threats, and prepare for counterattacks. The Marauders won't give up easily." The engineer nodded. I never thought a cook could do what you just did. Jared smiled faintly, exhaustion showing in his posture. I'm not a soldier. I never claimed to be. But humans survive by thinking, adapting, and using what they have. That's what I do. Through the bay, survivors tended to the wounded. Improvised weapons were distributed, and morale began to rise. They had faced impossible odds, yet they had prevailed. The ordinary humans of Elysium, 9 had fought back in extraordinary ways. Guided by a man they had once dismissed as just a cook, the captain remained incapacitated, but the threat was not gone. Jared knew the Marauders' fleet could strike again, and the station was still vulnerable. He gathered the survivors, giving them instructions. Patrol damaged areas, watch for remaining drones, tend to the injured, and secure the station as best as possible. For the first time, he allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. The chaos, the fear, the destruction, all of it had been intense, terrifying, and exhausting. Yet he had proven one undeniable truth. Human ingenuity and courage could outmatch technology and fear. The survivors looked to him not just as a guide, but as a leader. The cook they had overlooked had become every man's last hope. And while the battle was not fully over, Jared knew that this moment, this triumph in the heart of disaster, would inspire every person who had witnessed it. He looked at the distant viewport, where the blackness of space stretched endlessly. Somewhere out there, the Marauders were regrouping, preparing for the next wave. Jared's mind raced with strategies, contingencies, and plans. He was tired, bruised, and burned, but he was far from done. We've bought time, he said quietly to the group. Now we prepare for what's next, and we survive together. As the station trembled with distant explosions and the smoke drifted through the corridors, Jared felt a strange calm settle over him. The chaos had not broken him. The fear had not paralyzed him. He had turned what others saw as weakness into strength. The ordinary cook had become a force of human ingenuity, courage, and resilience. And the fight for Elysium. Ma. 9 was far from over. The station of Elysium, 9 trembled under the distant roar of the Marauder fleet. Smoke still drifted through the corridors, fires glowed faintly in storage bays, and the hum of damaged machinery filled every hall. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was a sense of cautious hope. The command node had been disrupted, the drones malfunctioned, and the survivors had learned to trust in themselves. And in one man, Jared Klein. He moved through the corridors, checking on survivors and damaged systems. The young communications officer was restoring long-range signals to nearby human patrol ships. Engineers were rerouting power and reinforcing weakened bulkheads. Civilians who had once cowered now carried supplies, assisted the wounded, and helped barricade vulnerable areas. Jared watched them with quiet pride. The station was no longer just a place of chaos. It was a battlefield transformed into a human stronghold. "Jared!" the engineer called, approaching him with a worried frown. "We've stabilized most of the bay, but the Marauders' fleet hasn't stopped. They're circling, waiting for us to make a mistake." Jared nodded.
Then we won't make one. They think they can scare us into surrender.
They haven't learned anything about humans yet. He paused, eyes narrowing. We need a plan to make them leave permanently. He gathered a small team of civilians, soldiers, and engineers. They were tired, bruised, and terrified, but they trusted Jared completely. They knew he could see solutions where no one else could. Jared explained his idea, a coordinated series of traps, diversions, and controlled explosions, to give the impression that the station was stronger, better armed, and more organized than it truly was. If the Marauders believed the station was defended and human ingenuity was unyielding, they might retreat. Every corridor we secure, every drone we disable, every visible sign of resistance, it will make them second-guess themselves. Jared said, "And humans are good at surviving." We are unpredictable. That will be our advantage. They set to work immediately. Fires were suppressed with chemical suppressants salvaged from the labs. Drones that still functioned were lured into traps and disabled. Makeshift barricades and decoys were arranged to give the illusion of a larger, better prepared force. Jared coordinated every move, moving like a conductor of a chaotic orchestra, turning fear into order. As they worked, the Marauders' ships descended closer to the station. Their weapons hummed ominously, but the overload of the command node had left them disorganized. Drones patrolled erratically, some even crashing into the station's hull. Jared watched, calculating, improvising, adapting. At a crucial moment, a Marauder patrol drone broke through one of the outer doors. Jared quickly grabbed a container of volatile cooking chemicals and tossed it into the drone's path. The chemicals ignited, creating smoke and a small explosion. The drone faltered, spinning out of control and crashing into the wall. The survivors cheered softly. Each small victory built morale. Jared knew it wouldn't be enough on its own. The Marauders needed to feel a coordinated, intelligent threat. He led a team through hidden maintenance corridors, using vents and side passages to appear suddenly, disabled drones, and retreat before the aliens could react. The timing had to be perfect. One misstep could alert the Marauder fleet that the station was vulnerable. Hours passed, the station alive with tension and careful activity. The humans moved like a single organism, guided by Jared's calm leadership. Each person had a role, each task calculated, yet flexibility remained key. Improvisation became as important as planning. Finally, the moment came. Jared positioned explosives and energy pulses near key power conduits, wiring them to detonate in sequence. The idea was simple: create chaos in controlled bursts, simulating heavy defense, and convince the Marauders that the station was impenetrable.
Ready?
He whispered to the engineer. The engineer nodded. Ready? Jared took a deep breath and triggered the first pulse. Sparks flew, alarms rang, lights flickered, and drones malfunctioned further. The second pulse went off moments later, followed by the controlled explosions in corridors that had been reinforced. The bay lit up with flashes of light and smoke. The Marauder fleet observed the chaos from outside, sensors scanning, trying to understand the source of resistance. Jared watched them, calm but alert. Their formation wavered. Their ships hesitated. They expected a weak, disorganized station, one they could destroy quickly. But Elysium 9 had become unpredictable, improvised, alive. A distant roar from the ships shook the hull. A group of surviving soldiers and civilians had joined Jared on the observation deck, looking out at the Marauders. They're slowing down, one said, voice trembling. They're leaving? Jared nodded slightly. They're learning something about humans. They don't like what they see. The Marauder fleet hesitated, then began to retreat. Their ships moved slowly at first, then accelerated, leaving Elysium 9 behind. The station trembled with the aftershocks of distant fire, but the humans had won this battle. It wasn't brute strength that had saved them, nor superior technology. It was ingenuity, courage, and the ability to adapt. Cheers erupted across the station, quiet at first, then louder. Survivors hugged, laughed, and cried. Injured soldiers were helped to their feet. Civilians who had trembled with fear now smiled, exhausted, but alive. And through it all, Jared moved quietly, checking on systems, making sure everyone was safe, ensuring that the victory was complete. Captain Roland finally emerged from the command hall, expression unreadable. He looked at Jared and, for the first time in years, there was no scorn in his eyes. Only respect. I underestimated you, he said.
I see now that the cook is more than just a cook. You saved this station.
You saved us all, Jared shook his head. Not me. All of us. Every person who acted, who improvised, who trusted each other. That saved us. The captain nodded slowly, understanding. Jared had led them not with weapons or rank, but with intelligence, calm, and courage. The humans of Elysium. 9 had learned an invaluable lesson. Heroism could come from the unlikeliest places. In the following hours, the survivors worked together to stabilize the station. Fires were extinguished, critical systems repaired, and the wounded treated. The morale of the station soared, now underpinned by the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, human ingenuity could prevail. Jared returned to his small kitchen for the first time in days. The smell of burnt circuits and smoke lingered, but it was softened by the faint aroma of freshly baked bread he had managed to prepare earlier. He cleaned, organized, and began cooking a simple meal, as he always did. Soldiers and civilians gathered around, grateful, tired, and relieved. Some brought ingredients from the stores. Some offered to help. As he served the food, he looked around at the faces of the people who had once doubted him. Now they saw him as more than a cook. They saw a leader, a strategist, and a symbol of hope. Whispers floated through the crowd. He's the one who saved us. Jared smiled faintly but said nothing. He didn't need praise. Seeing people alive, fed, and recovering was enough. Heroism, he knew, was not about glory. It was about action, courage, and the ability to inspire others to act. The alien diplomats, once terrified, now cautiously returned. They had witnessed the chaos and human adaptability firsthand. They understood that these humans were not to be underestimated. Some offered formal thanks, others simply nodded, recognizing the courage it took to survive and protect an entire station. Captain Roland approached once more, this time with a small group of senior officers. Elysium, I owes you a debt, he said. You showed us what humans can do when they refuse to surrender. You are every man's last hope, and today you proved it. Jared shook his head gently. We all proved it. Anyone could have done it, given the chance. Humans survive because we never stop thinking, adapting, and helping each other. That's why we endure. Later, when the station finally quieted, Jared stepped outside onto the observation deck. Stars stretched endlessly, distant and cold. The Marauder fleet was gone. Silence returned, broken only by the hum of Elysium, 9's engines. He breathed deeply, feeling the exhaustion of days filled with fire, smoke, and chaos, but also the quiet satisfaction of survival and triumph. Below him, the station's residents worked together to restore Elysium, 9 fully. Engineers repaired sections of the hull, soldiers patrolled cautiously, and civilians helped wherever they could. Life would continue, scarred but resilient, because humans had faced death and emerged stronger. Jared returned to his kitchen one last time that evening. He prepared a meal, simple but nourishing, and served it to those gathered. They ate in silence at first, then quietly celebrated their survival. He moved among them, offering advice, encouragement, and a smile. Someone whispered to a nearby soldier. They said he was just a cook. The soldier looked at Jared, who was wiping a counter, and continued, "But he saved us all." Jared smiled faintly, letting the words sink in. He didn't need titles, recognition, or medals. He had learned long ago that usefulness, courage, and ingenuity mattered more than rank or reputation. Today, those qualities had saved an entire station. Today, the unlikeliest hero had proven that humans could overcome even the greatest odds. And as the lights of Elysium, 9 glowed softly in the endless blackness of space, Jared Klein quietly returned to his duties, the ordinary cook who had become every man's last hope. They said he was just a cook, but when the station fell, he became every man's last hope.